Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. I have the privilege today to speak with Zev Feldman, the jazz detective. Hi, Zev.
Hey, Ken.
And talking about his new jazz detective releases, as well as a handful of other releases, 6 in total, for the upcoming record store day, beginning with Chet Baker, Blue Room. Zev's going to hold these up because they won't do for me. Bill Evans, Treasures. Beautiful. Sonny Stitt, Boppin' in Baltimore, live at the Left Bank. There he is. Shirley Scott, Queen Talk, live at the Left Bank. There she is.
That is on Seller. That is on Reel to Reel, by the way.
Reel to Reel. And another one on Reel to Reel, Corey Weed's label, Walter Bishop Jr., Bishop the Bank. There we go. And finally, a reissue of a very popular Resonance title that Zev did, Eric Dolphy, Musical Prophet, the expanded 1963 New York studio sessions. So this is essentially, I didn't realize till I opened this, this is the reissue of Iron Man and Conversations.
Yes, correct. These stem from Eric Dolphy's personal masters, which were in a suitcase that James Newton ended up retrieving from family friends of Eric Dolphy many, many years after he had passed away. And we had the opportunity of working with these tapes to reissue these albums that originally came out on Alan Douglas's production company with his label. They've been out a couple of times, but we had a chance to go back, and thanks to James Newton, who was able to read the tea leaves, we were able to include some additional takes and material that didn't come on the original albums, and some very interesting material. And for the first issue, we had Bernie Grundman that did the mastering, and it came out with RTI pressing it. And there was a different front and back cover from photographer Chuck Stewart. We chose different artwork for the front and back of this new issue. And instead of Grundman, this time we used Mr. Kevin Gray, who everyone knows. And the first pressing happened at RTI, but this release was done at a company called Vinylist, which is in Canada, who have been doing some exceptional audiophile pressings. They say 180 grams, but it probably comes out a little closer on many of the records to 200, but it's a really quality production. So we changed things around. That was a very critically acclaimed release for us at the label. And when we first put it out, Ken, we made 3,000. They sold out, and we started getting hate mail from people wanting to know why we would only press so few of them. So, when we're, I should say, in this arena of putting out these kind of projects, they are very, very expensive. They tie up a lot of resources, and it's through the generosity of the record company owners that allow these to happen. So we were able to go back to record store day. Originally it was 3,000 or 4,000 for the world this time. And it's a equally quality experience. Again, you got a different mastering engineer, slightly different packaging. But again, liner notes by Robin D.G. Kelly and James Newton, interviews of the late Sonny Simmons, Sonny Rollins, Henry Threadgill, Nicole Mitchell, Steve Coleman, David Murray. But it's an epic package, and we had a chance to go back to the tapes. And, Eric Dolphy really matters. He's very important. This is really one of the proud moments of my career in production, working on this project, which initially came out, 7 years ago in 2016.
Wow.
So really happy to bring this one out again for a victory lap. But, as folks know, there is distinction sometimes. Different mastering engineers with their proprietary their technology and the way that they master it. So anyways, I hope everyone will enjoy that. And if they're wondering, those are really the distinctions between each one.
And I know at the Jazz Record Center, we still get in those records, Iron Man and Conversations, from time to time, but suffice to say that this probably sounds superior to that, with Bernie and then Kevin Gray doing the work in the contemporary era.
I think so. It was an incredible team production. I mean, the music is great. James Newton did an amazing job. Our whole team did. And I'm very excited. I think Eric Dolphy is really he is the musical prophet. He is really an inspiring guy who continues to reach to a lot of new fans too. I think he's important and matters. So
and obviously the first one did so well because the only other title you've repressed was Bill Evans Some Other Time. So this must have done so well that you knew you could repress and sell it.
We did. We also repressed the Jaco Pastorius Truth, Liberty, and Soul, which came out again, I think 2016. But again, it's because of the demand. We know that some people want it. We felt bad that some people didn't get to it the first time it came out. So there was a demand for it. So we wanted to do it right. But again, you make it a little bit different, right? And there should be something. These are limited edition collector's pieces. These aren't the long tail meant to sell over long periods of time. From us at the record labels, the way we look at it is not being greedy, shipping out the right amount, having the numbers that work, and everyone's happy.
So there are a lot of record store day trashers, and they're very they have a lot of vitriol, and I see them when I do previews on all this stuff, and for no other reason. I asked Fred Cohen once, who's the Wizard of Oz, on what you should collect and what has future value. You said this stuff because it's gone literally overnight in many cases, and you're not going to see it again. And they're beautiful packages. I don't understand the haters. Just don't buy it. I think people hate it when they can't get them, when they don't show up at their store, if they live in Idaho or something. What do you say to that?
Well, I can certainly appreciate people. First of all, it's a very passionate subject for a lot of people, right? I want people to be satisfied. I want them to find the records. And by the way, if anyone out here is listening to this and you've really tried to find one through your store and you get stuck, I always welcome getting a message via social media and always trying to help, because there are stores out there that have it. And, Record Store Day also, at the end of the day, these independent retailers do list on Discogs and other places. So there is a possibility. And I got to say that I think they're out there. But if someone is stuck, reach out to me. I'm just so grateful for all the support and goodwill, and folks out there have been supporting this, because this event has allowed these projects to be given birth that otherwise might even seem too risky on paper to take care of. But when we ship sold out, you know what? We can recoup on the massive amount of resources that have to go out. And I don't know. I want everyone to be happy, but you got to understand that organization, Record Store Day, has been so supportive in what they've accomplished over the last 15 years, and what we've been able to, in counting, and what we've been able to do now. So I just want to keep going. I see this as a very important vehicle, that we just couldn't make the numbers work, that we did it as a release. And these are collectors limited editions, end of the day. So,
you're in my Jazz Vinyl Lovers group. People can instant message you there. You're on Instagram. You're easy to find if people want to get this stuff.
I am. I want to say something. Can I take a moment to talk about the Jazz Vinyl Lovers group?
Sure.
I have to say, it has brought so much enjoyment and fun as a forum to share what I'm listening to and see what my friends are listening to out there. It's a great group. And if somebody on here is not familiar, they should check out Jazz Vinyl Lovers. It's just, I find inspiration. We come across things. I get turned on and made aware of other projects, other albums that are out there. And I think it's just a really cool group of folks that are doing this. So kudos to you.
Thanks. It's fun. I'm getting more requests than ever. I don't know why. I guess because it's up to 12,000 or whatever. So let's talk about Chet Baker, the Blue Room, 1979 Bear Studio Sessions in Holland. This is one that I thought sounded fantastic. This is great fidelity. And can you open it up and show the inside and everything?
Sure.
I don't want you to unseal it. Don't do that.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Just 1 second.
But the sonic quality matters to a lot of people, and this one sounds fantastic. This is on your label, Jazz Detective. Great photos. There's a great booklet in there from what I remember. And this to me is him. Everybody loves early Chet Baker when he's beautiful and he plays really cleanly, but I like old Chet Baker. in the late 70s. Well, he still looks great. Chet Baker in 1979 is just kicking ass. He did 3 steeplechase records at the same time, and he sounds really wonderful. So how did you find these tapes? What's the story of this?
Well, I found these tapes, or I should say Frank Jochimsen found these tapes, who works with the Netherlands Jazz Archive, who brokered this deal with KRO in the Netherlands to put these out. These, in short, are 2 studio sessions that were done in 1979. And Chet, in my opinion, is in very strong form. You know, it's no secret. He was a guy who he had some ups and downs, but he, even to the very, very end, was able to deliver masterful, virtuosic performances. And he had music that was such a big part of his DNA. He didn't read music, but he had this musicality and a feel and something that only the very most talented artists have. He's also, to me, a really inspiring guy. And I don't just say that. I know a lot of us in the Jazz Vinyl Lovers group and people who follow this channel feel that way. I am taken with all aspects of Chet's career. And in particular, I really love the third act, especially in the late 70s going through to the very end. I mean, Chet Baker, Let's Get Lost was also a project that turned a whole generation of younger fans into the music over 30 years ago, 35 years ago. And I love it all. I find a charm and says matureness in his playing and his sounds, but this was a team effort. It was Frank who found the tapes, and at the same time,
where did they find these tapes?
Well, Frank found them at the Netherlands Jazz Archive and knew about them through these collections. He is like the jazz detective of Holland, if you will.
What's his name again?
Frank Jochimsen. He is my co-producer on this project. You'll see his name on there.
Right.
So last year, in the winter of 2022, I was working on forming my new record company, actually called Deep Digs Music Group. I wanted to have a label group with different imprints, with different identities. Jazz, I got to have my jazz label, of course, right? So that'd be Jazz Detective, but also the Deep Digs imprint, and under the Deep Digs Music Group umbrella. So Deep Digs, later this year, we're going to have a non-jazz recording. We're actually going to be putting out unissued recordings from Sister Rosetta Tharpe that I've never heard before. Yeah, and then that's a very exciting project coming in partnership with folks at INA France from the legendary ORTF radio archives from 1966. More on that later. But, you know, I love being, it's nice when people remember you for anything. I love being the jazz detective, but I'm actually an audiophile and have tastes that are all over the place in terms of music. I love archival, older music. And anyways.
So this fellow, Frank Jochimsen, he found these and thought, okay, let me see if Zeb wants to put these out. That's how it works sometimes?
Well, I knew, because we had already been working on Live in Paris from Chet Baker, which came out on the Elemental label. I knew that Jordi Soleil and Carlos Agustin, the principals of Elemental Music, would be in for Chet Baker. And because I was starting my label at the same time, I remember reaching out to Frank and said, Frank, you have any unissued Chet Baker in those vaults? And he came to me and said, not here at the archive, but he knew of these recordings that existed. So it's sort of crystallizing into, hey, well, this will be one of the projects for the new Jazz Detective label. And we worked it out with Carlos and Jordi when we started it, that this would be one of the first projects, not to mention my 2 Ahmad Jamal releases, Emerald City Nights, the first 2 volumes. And there'll be a third later this year.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, but
this one was mastered by Bernie Grundman. You said it was cut at pressed at Memphis, which is owned by GZ. Right. So that's American pressing plant, or
it is. The plant is based here in the States.
What is your take on the different? You know, some people are like, oh, that was pressed at RTI. It's got to be junk. It's my impression that all these places probably do good work, but there are anomalies and there are bad pressings from time to time. Like I told, well, what's your take on that?
I think
pressing plants.
It happens with the best of the plants. It is just inevitable. And I think that there are a lot of pressing plants that are doing quality work right now. And let's talk about something else, Ken, okay? The realities of working with pressing plants. Over the last year, it has gotten more difficult and difficult.
Really?
Inventory of places that can take your projects and but aren't at max capacity. A lot of the pressing plants, even the biggest ones, won't take anything new. They're not interested in a new relationship because they're working with so much. But luckily, Elemental Music does a lot of work with a variety of different plants. And yeah, but you know what? The mastering engineer, the way the lacquer is cut, these are to me the fundamentals of the record sounding great. And that's what happens. It starts with the source. But you know what? This is a very sensitive hotbed topic for a lot of folks. You know what? There are all sorts of factors. Let me also make you aware of something too that a lot of people don't know. First of all, it's all in the numbers when we do these projects and forecasting and knowing if we can even turn a profit versus a lot of times eating our shirt because something doesn't live up to expectations. That's why we have to be very limited. We have to know it's going to ship out. I think that a lot of plants are at maximum capacity and back order for already a long list of projects that folks get in line. When we do these projects, we have to turn in our materials, including the booklets, 9 to 12 months.
Wow.
Before the release date. So you can imagine to get your place on the conveyor belt, you have to have everything submitted. And it is a process. And it's very stressful. On the record labels, it takes a lot of generosity. Here's something that I wanted to mention to you, though. This is what came back to me. So, about pressing in the United States. First of all, there is an enormous amount of freight charges, which are associated as one component of the project. So if I'm pressing, for instance, overseas, it could be Optimal or GZ. But to ship those products to my U.S. distributors,
wow, records are heavy.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for free. And that's in your overhead. So it is really important for us, a lot of record labels, to be thinking about where we're going to press. It really helps an independent person like myself to find a plant that's in North America. So it lowers the risk and makes it easier. But or the projects wouldn't turn a profit. And you know what? We are walking a fine line between art and commerce, and there is already such an amount of generosity displayed from the record labels for doing this. You know what? I'm not going to get too far into this, but it's not Billy Joel's greatest hits, folks. We're talking about a limited edition vinyl LP for collectors. So it becomes even more risky if those don't sell. And when you add all these other pizza items, these line items, and especially shipping, it can choke the horse, literally.
One of the great things you guys have done is put a focus on artists that most people aren't aware of. It was great, and I don't mean to bring up the competition, but Kraft put out the Lockjaw and Shirley Scott box, and you're putting out on Reel to Reel. Corey's putting out Shirley Scott, if you could hold it up, Queen Talk, Live at the Left Bank, limited to 3,000 copies. Yep. Shirley Scott, George Coleman, Bobby Durham, Ernie Andrews. You told me this was cut by Kevin Gray, yep, pressed at standard vinyl. Now, yep, I didn't really love this record. Norma Maslov didn't love it because I thought she was sort of low in the mix, and you have a side with Ernie Andrews who, I didn't really care for that at all. And it's so I make the case for this record.
Well, here's the case. Shirley Scott matters. There are enough of her fans out there that will want to hear it. It's important recording, and you know what? We're lucky the tape exists. We were really lucky. It was sitting on a shelf. The opportunity of bringing it out in a limited edition for the fans that would appreciate it, or not doing it. And you know what? Sorry. I think when Joey DeFrancesco listened to the recording and he loved it, that also was very contagious with
Great
Corey.
liner notes. He said a lot about who she was, and it's hard to get information about her anyway. So what do you mean it was on a shelf? How'd you find this tape? You and Corey?
Well, this tape came from the Left Bank Jazz Society tape archives. And over the last 7 years, I've become the co-custodian of the tape archives with my good friend, John Fowler, who is one of the founding members of the Left Bank, who was an officer there. And, these tapes surfaced a couple of years ago. And Corey and I love Oregon and we love Shirley Scott. Come on, I've been posting it in JBL. You see my records. But you know what? You can say what you want, but this is an important document. It's not going to sell 1 million copies, but we make it available for the folks that want to hear it. I'm sorry. It's a great band. I think it's a great recording. It's a great presentation, and I think it's a recording that people want to listen to. But it took generosity and it took passion and a lot of love for the artistry of Shirley Scott for this to happen. And Corey Weeds has been my brother who has stepped up to the plate. We did it first, Etta Jones and the Cedar Walton Trio. We did Roy Brooks' Understanding. We've now done
fantastic record.
Thank you. I mean, Corey should get a lot of props here. He was bitten by the archival bug that I had worked on with George Clavin and said, what can we do? And he didn't have to do this. And the tape could have sat on the shelf, but you know what? I'm glad it came out. It's a document. You know what? It's an important recording. It celebrates the legacy of this artist. And you know what? Shirley Scott has her prestige output in a bunch of other labels too. And those are great records. But I stand by this. I think that we're lucky it's coming out. And, people are saying, what aren't you putting out? This one matters. Shirley Scott matters. So I hope the folks groove on it. And my gosh, this band with Coleman and Bobby Durham in the rear, I mean, the band is cooking and going hard. And Ernie Andrews, by the way, Mr. McAuliffe, I think is also an important artist too, who sadly we lost last year, who had a long legacy in this music. And he was a musician, singer, and I'm glad about this. Corey and I went back and forth, and he's like, I think it's cooking with Ernie Andrews. And the decision was made to do it. But isn't it great that here we are decades and decades later that these recordings are able to see the light of day? But I want to thank Corey for stepping up, for being generous. And, every one of these releases is a team effort of a lot of folks, including Zach Shelby Cisco, who has been a patron saint working with me, driving the car for going on 9 years already. I mean, through it all. And, John Fowler from the Left Bank, our design crew. Let's talk about this. The Stitt, Bishop, and the Shirley Scott were done by an amazing album cover designer named John Sellers, who does a lot of work and archival based. And we had these sort of things that we were talking about, trying to go after something that had a feeling of the late 60s. And I remember for the Sonny Stitt that we'll talk about, I said, give me some typography, like one of those, like those signs that you would see at the Green Mill in Chicago with the bulbs. And he totally took the idea and ran with it. But Shirley Scott, man, I'm standing by this one.
Well, let me see. Corey put out the Roy Brooks album, and that created a whole sort of reappraisal of who he was. Big New York Times feature. And I think in the same way, this album, it has so many different kind of flavors and things going on. But the most serious thing for me is their version of Impressions. And her solo on there is off the chart. And I think if there was more stuff like that, she would be considered more in like a Larry Young kind of vein, instead of like the B team to Lockjaw and Stanley Turrentine. She's a monster musician, and you can really hear it on Impressions. But then when they do Never Can Say Goodbye, that's what I don't really care about. But I agree with you. I've been singing her praises forever, because when you find any of her records with Lockjaw or the records of hers you can find, they're very hard to find, those prestige records. Sure. I'm lucky to have them. They're well played, and they're just beautiful recordings. So let's talk about another one on Reel to Reel by Corey, Bishop the Bank.
Yep.
And this is limited to 3,000 copies, and it was again Kevin Gray at Standard Vinyl, an incredible lineup: Lou McIntosh, Dick Burke, Dick Burke and Harold Vick, and Harold Vick is on fire on this record.
Yeah.
It's another, if you hear his Blue Note record, that sounds like a Blue Note record, but he is taking it out on this thing, man. Tell me the story of this record and where I guess it's from that same archive.
It's from the same archive. We've been working with John Fowler, who allowed me over several years to take literally suitcases full of tape reels. I was living in Los Angeles for the last 17 years, and I moved back to the East Coast in June of last year. But basically, I was taking all these tapes back and forth between Baltimore and LA. George Clavin at Resonance was transferring them. And George really wasn't interested in putting out some of this stuff, but Corey was. And look, there were multiple tape reels done between 66 and 67 with the same band, with Vic, with Lou Bennett, and Dick Burke, who's
those
also
guys backing up a feature artist. Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there's been some comments made. It sounds like a George Coleman record on the Stitt, or it sounds like a Harold Vick record on. I've heard some people comment. By the way, we have the yearbooks, which list in detail all the sidemen and the dates of all the shows. And this is what it was. But let's talk about Walter Bishop Jr.
Well, let me say though, I think part of the reason people say that is, a lot of people who are just into collecting now came up in the CD era, and if it doesn't sound perfect, they're all upset. But it seems to be a consistent problem. I mean, look at Rudy Van Gelder. It was hard for people to record a piano and because the piano is a full range instrument. It's like a big percussion instrument. So it's hard to get a really great sound on piano. But in saying that, I thought the piano sounded great on this. And Walter Bishop, who really deserves more coverage, sounds great as well. A lot of people don't know who he is.
Let's talk about something first. And I want to talk about the importance of Walter Bishop. But, these recordings were never made to be professionally released in the first place. These are time capsule magical documents that exist. And believe me, we could have decided not to put stuff out. I'm glad we did. But, these recordings were originally made. The artists were asked if it'd be okay to record. They were given a copy, and the club held it. And what would happen is the staff of the Left Bank were working the event. They didn't all have a chance to sit down and properly digest the music. So Vernon Welsh, who was the engineer and one of the officers at the Left Bank, he'd run tape. And the following Wednesdays they'd had staff meetings for the Left Bank. And by the way, what was the Left Bank? It was a not-for-profit organization of multiply diverse cultures, different people, black, white, men, women, that came together. Vernon Welsh sold cars. The engineer, he sold cars during the week. But on Sundays at the Left Bank in the afternoon, they'd put on these shows. Families would come. And because of Vernon Welsh and the organization, they ran tape and they captured a lot of very important music. So, I feel like we're continuing, by the way, on work that Joel Dorn had done in the early 2000s on his Label M albums that was putting out Left Bank tapes. And also, there have been a few others. I know a few out there know the George Coleman with the Wynton Kelly Trio on VJ Records Japan, live at the Left Bank. That voice you hear at the very beginning is Vernon Welsh. And there were also a couple of releases from the great Joe Henderson that came out around 1995, 1996. Joe Henderson and the Wynton Kelly Trio recorded in 68. Those were from tapes that Joe had been given by the Left Bank. That's with the Wynton Kelly Trio. But let's talk about Harold Bishop Jr. for a second. He's a guy, doesn't get a lot of mention. He doesn't get the props and the credit. He was a bebopper. He was a guy along the lines of playing with folks like Charlie Parker and was part of that whole scene.
Yeah,
and
I read that he was born in Harlem and grew up with Kenny Dorham, among other guys, part of that whole scene. These are hardcore beboppers. Exactly.
And I'm like a lot of us in the JBL group, we post our Bishop records. There have been some few of us that have posted them. And I'm taken by it. When those tape reels were there that we found it, I was like, we should do something with this. I think he really matters. And there was a lot of risk, and again, generosity. And Corey was the one that said, "Okay, we'll do this, and I'll put out Shirley, Scott, and Bishop. You'll do Stitt, and we'll all put them out together at the same time to make it a big celebration." But anyways, this is a wonderful release. Ted Pankin writes the liner notes on there.
Great Ted Pankin.
Yep, and
One of the best.
he really is. And there are a lot of interviews and rare photographs that are inside here again too. But Walter Bishop Jr., Bishop the Bank, I like a lot of these. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears go into it. And I hope people realize how important the recordings are and how lucky we are to have them. And you know what? Thanks to like working with Sheldon Zaharko and also working with people like Grundman and Kevin Gray, we're able to make improvements. And I want people to continue to listen to this music, not just for Record Store Day and beyond, but here you go. Here's some new music material that's never been out before. And by the way, everything done legitimately with the musicians' families and paying publishing. And I'm sorry, I have to mention that, Ken, because there are some labels in this day and age that subscribe to a different philosophy. Especially, it's better to beg for forgiveness and ask for permission. Don't even get me started. It makes me sick. Because you know what? Elemental, Corey Weeds, myself, Resonance, we live by a code of ethics that go into doing these. But there are other companies out there right now putting stuff out the wrong way. And frankly,
companies that everyone would know.
No, not necessarily. Some of us would know for sure. And it already happens, especially in Europe. But there's I know of one here in the States. I don't want to start, you know what? I got my lane here. Happy to be here because frankly, it's because of all of the folks that are following this that go out and support Record Store Day and support these projects. And we couldn't do it without them. Just like I can't do it without the record label people saying, okay, we're gonna take a risk and we'll put this out. There's just a lot of parts here and a lot of emotion and everyone just wants this to be a successful event. So I hope.
We'll talk about the Stitt and the Evans. Can you explain, because people seem to think because of some information out there that these tapes show up and they're pristine and all that has to happen is they go on the reel, they go through the mastering desk, they cut the lacquer, we don't touch them. But talk about the issues that an old tape can have that have to be fixed sometimes in the digital domain to sound good.
Well, when you have a live tape, there are dropouts. There are inconsistencies in the fidelity of the audio, things that mastering engineers can improve, vastly improve, that can, there's a difference of just having a tape, man, and having an album. When we put out these projects, we are curating for a listening experience. When you have a tape, there are introductions, there are delays, there's all sorts of stuff. We have to prune here, prune there, and make it so it has you can listen to it all the time. Like, these projects are curated and put together in a way to be an LP or a CD release, no different than anything else that you buy. There is thought that goes into it. Hey, how does the record does it start on a good note with some oomph to it? But we have dropouts. We have somebody maybe off mic, all sorts of things that you can correct. But boy, oh boy, there's a lot of, and I'm sensitive. I understand people are passionate, but there's a lot of armchair folks out there that just don't understand the process. You don't just start with a live tape and pour it into a lacquer. It would sound
maybe some studio tapes you can do that, but like you said, these were live performances.
Well, that's what makes the Tone Poet series and what Kraft is doing, and that's what makes it so magical, right? Because you had Rudy Van Gelder that did the editing, and we have that final reel. So because of that, you can dump that final reel, go analog right into the lacquer, and that's why music matters and Tone Poets. I mean, come on, we all know that's a whole thing. Those were curated studio albums, different sorts of circumstances. And I'm not saying stuff that a lot of folks don't realize. I hope they don't roll their eyes at me. But I have to roll my eyes sometimes when I get did this come right from the tapes and this conversation? Because I wish more people understood what went into it. But at the end of the day, we're able to have something that sounds good and we're able to have releases that make people happy.
And you're shedding light on artists who deserve some coverage, like Sonny Stitt, who doesn't get spoken of, who made a shit ton of records that do sell. If you could hold it up, this is Sonny Stitt bopping in Baltimore, live with the Left Bank, Kenny Barron, Sam Jones, Lewis Hayes, Jazz Detective, Deep Digs, Elemental Music, the Left Bank Jazz Society, limited to 2,500 pressings, recorded in November 1973 when I was in the 10th grade. Oh my God. And this is you really hear what a top flight band this is. To me, this is one of the best bands, along with the band on here, of like real professionals. I mean, these are great performances. They support Sonny Stitt so well. How did you find this, and why did you release this? Which is something I mean to ask you for each one, but you sort of answered before I can ask it.
Sure. These came from
done by Bernie Grundman, pressed at Optimal. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. This came in the same archives, and at the same time, Corey Weeds and I were actually looking at all three of these projects. And Sonny Stitt, we're enamored by the man. His music is timeless. It holds up well. He is one of the masters of bebop. When I think of, he is a gunslinger. He's a guy that you wouldn't want to get up on stage with because he's going to slice you off at the knees because he's that tough. And he was able to do things on his instrument that very few people could do at that level. He matters. He's an inspiration. I think he's a badass. I mean,
and he doesn't get talked about as much. He did make a ton of records, because sometimes we'll have like this many at the store, but they all go pretty quickly because he's such a great performer, and he recorded for so many different labels. He's on Verve, he's on Roulette, he's on Savoy.
Arco,
but just a great player. Well, finally, and this is an incredible release. This was my favorite. This is amazing. 7,500 copies. Bernie Grundman, pressed at Memphis. Bill Evans Treasure solo trio orchestra recordings. It's beautiful performances of some of his best known works. The recording quality is excellent. The bands are really consistent on each thing. This to me is the best thing on Evans since maybe some other time. This is a great. I bet you're gonna repress this one, because this is a great recording. How did you find this one?
Well, I wish I could say I'm working with some incredible people these days on my teams, and actually my dear friend and co-founder of Elemental Music, Jordi Soleil, he and Carlos found these tapes. They had been hitting the pavement pretty hard. They knew that I had a relationship with the estate of Bill Evans, and they'd been looking for stuff. And they called me again. This is the winter of 2022, and they're like, "Zev, we got something really special. We found some Bill Evans recordings that no one has." And when I say no one, it's not in the discographies.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So it's come from radio broadcasts. Ole Matheson, who is with the Danish radio, he was the one that produced these recordings, is the way I understand it. They come from his archives, and we were able to get these and clear all the necessary rights for it to come out.
But these are wonderful performances of some of his classic tunes: Waltz for Debbie, I Should Care, Time Remembered, and multiple versions of the same songs: Reperson I Do, Round Midnight, Autumn Leaves, Emily, Nardis, Elsa. I mean, and they're beautiful performances. This is from 65 to 69. This is really him at his peak, some would say, with Nels Henning Orsted Pedersen, one of the great bass players, Alan Dawson and Alex Reel, great drummers. And then talk about the do you know the history of how this worked out, of him playing with the Royal Danish Symphony Orchestra and Danish Radio Big Band?
Well, you can listen yourself. I think they're really great recordings that show him in a variety of different settings, solo, trio, and orchestra. And you have these different configurations of these different instrumentation with him. I think that the trio stuff is riveting.
Yeah.
It's always nice. I mean, Eddie Gomez and Marty Morell. That was the first trio for me. The Tokyo concert, believe it or not, was the first Bill Evans record that I got before all the Riverside recordings, ironically enough. So that music speaks to me, and it's been really wonderful working with both of them now for a number of years on each of these projects. And they did interviews for us on each of them. And Mark Myers, love him. He has such an understanding and grasp on Bill Evans's legacy, and we've had a chance to do several projects together, and we brought him back to work on these. And I mean, it's got an extensive booklet. There are photographs you haven't seen, tells the story about all of it. And you know what? You haven't heard it all yet. And I say put on your seatbelt too.
There's more from this same group of sessions?
There are some other recordings that
Wow.
have been released before. Again, they haven't been documented in the discographies. Hang on, there'll be more coming. It's going to be a really exciting year end. But right now, we're talking about treasures. It's really important.
Solo piano. The big band has Polly Mickelborg, Nels Henning Orsay Pedersen, Sahab Shihab, Idris Suleiman. I mean, these are the great, these are some of the guys who played on all those great MPS records. It's just an incredible lineup, and I thought the fidelity was fantastic. And I mean, wow, I bet you'll win some awards for this one, man, because it's really, really great.
Well, I just want to thank Jordi Soleil and Carlos Agustin again for their generosity and for coming to me with this and knowing that we could make something really great here, but also something that the fans would really love to. It's really nice because we have a chance to go back and celebrate these artists. And when you look at the Record Store Day events, the releases that have come out over the last 11, 12, 13 years,
Wow.
going back to the first ones on Resonance was 2010 or 11 that we put live at Top of the Gate. This marks my 10th production with the Bill Evans estate. The 11th will be coming out later this year. But it's really inspiring to me because so many people are discovering Bill's music for the first time. Record Store Day, as I'm sure you realize, he's one of the hot tickets every year. And we have people that are customers that are picking up these recordings that aren't even necessarily the typical jazz heads. But when you look at this, and first of all, you got this beautiful package and this really amazing guy, but the music, it's been turning on new generations of fans and other people that didn't realize his greatness. And he is really a timeless, important artist. And I don't know, it's really exciting to see that. I kind of chuckle a little bit every year. It's like, man, a lot of greatness has been done serving his legacy, and it's really because of all the fans out there. So, more to come. But Bill Evans, this is a really wonderful release that I hope folks will check out, and I hope they'll enjoy. It's just been a really exciting year. This is what I've been working on for over a year now, trying to put all these projects out. And unveiling time is always the most exciting. And I have to say again that there's a lot of generosity of folks from the record labels to the fans out there who are watching this and are going out. So hang in there, and I really appreciate everyone's patience. We're trying to build some great art here. And
Do you have any about how many plates, how many projects do you have up in the air at the moment? Upcoming.
Probably have about 10 things going at one time.
And can you give us any clue as to what might be in the next RSD installment?
Yeah. I'm working right now on previously unissued recordings of the iconic pianist Les McCann from the 60s that have never been out before. And that's going to be very exciting. I'm working on a box set of previously unissued Art Tatum recordings that have never been heard, where he sounds amazing. More on that later. That's going to be a 3 LP set. We have a couple of projects that we're just about finishing up. We have a 3 LP set of unissued. But first of all, Les McCann is on Resonance. Art Tatum is on Resonance. For Elemental Music, for Jazz Detective, we have some Cal Jada recordings that have never been out before, also on Jazz Detective. more Ahmad Jamal, very important late 60s recordings. What else am I working on? I'm working on a box set with the great Sonny Rollins right now, which is
Wow.
amazing for next year. And
Live recordings?
my recording. I just
Wow.
go right there, but it's going to be something really tasty that I think folks will like. Later this year, we'll be releasing some Sister Rosetta Tharpe recordings that have never been out before.
Amazing.
That's going to be on my Deep Digs label group, on the Deep Digs imprint. And Corey Weeds, I love this guy. We're going to be putting out some recordings that have never been heard before from Shelley, man.
Oh, wow. Far out.
I can't say more yet, but
Wow.
I'll just say that we've been working so hard, and there's more. Like, we're doing clearances. I've got even unissued Clifford Brown recordings that have never been out, and that'll be on Resonance. And what am I spacing out on? There's just a lot of love to
It's
go around.
amazing.
I'm working on more stuff, and
Wow.
it's a lot of peaks and valleys, ups and downs, because you don't really know until all the paperwork is signed if we have a vital person like an estate on board. There are so many turnkey players to these productions, so we try our best, and it's been fun for me. I never thought I would have so much fun my entire life doing this kind of work, and I'm just really grateful to you and the fans and everyone out there. I just say let's keep going, but hang in there, folks. And I don't mean to frustrate anyone, but a lot of good is going on here, in my opinion. And
Yeah, I think we're in a golden era of jazz reissues. So many amazing things have come out. Who would have ever thought this would have happened? And Record Store Day, helps highlight artists who are sort of forgotten, who are amazing artists like Shirley Scott or Sonny Stitt, who a lot of people just aren't aware of. On one hand, it's kind of sad that people don't really pay attention to a lot of contemporary jazz artists. You can't afford to press vinyl, but a lot of them, the music is kind of, I hear all this stuff. I still get all the CDs. It can be a little alien, but all this music feels so good and it's so melodic. And that's why it's lasted. It's such strong stuff. So kudos for you for sticking with it and not taking any guff and just taking names and kicking ass.
thank you. It's a lot of determination and stubbornness that goes into this. And I can't believe it. This year, though, 6 releases. We were counting it up. This is even more than last year. But anyways, I'm having the time of my life, and I don't want it to stop. And I just appreciate everyone's help and understanding and patience. And let's all work together. And kumbaya, great music coming, and let's keep going. Let's celebrate these artists.
Thank you, Zev.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone out there.